other people will always see aspects of themselves when they meet a reflector. Supposedly, if I'm talking to you, you're somehow reflecting how I am back at me, I guess.
Wait, I something else I've been thinking about is how long do I need to spend, how much time do I need to spend with a person to start to actually reflect them? Because I think that like I could be in conversation with you right now, but I'm actually still reflecting like the people that I was with last night.
In human design, I am a reflector, and in today's episode, Amy from the Ethereal Explorer will be interviewing me. Enjoy!
Today is so cool. I'm basically interviewing a unicorn. Uh, a reflector in human design, only 1% of the population are reflectors. And so this is Lonnie, my guest from Empath Spiritual Awakening, which is a YouTube channel I highly recommend checking out. I'll put the link below. If we want to start at the beginning, we're talking about human design, which is a system similar to astrology in the sense like you put in your birthday, you get a package of information about yourself. They categorize everybody into 5 different energy types, and reflector is one of them. And very super rare. They call them the mirrors. I am super excited to have come across your podcast and get to interview you. So thank you for taking the time today.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me onto your
Yeah.
podcast.
There's a few different background changes going on in this episode for various reasons that we don't have to get into, but uh okay, so what makes a reflector in human design is having all of your centers in your body graph undefined. And undefined centers are places where we're all said to be more easily influenced or take on the energy of others. And it's where you're most vulnerable to conditioning or just the environment in general. So everybody has some undefined centers, but the reflectors are rare in that they have all undefined. And I think this is why they're called reflectors, because it gives them the ability to take in the energy of other people and reflect it back to them. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing. If you are in control of your own energy, if you understand how to have energetic boundaries, like this is a really cool aspect of who you are. I think a lot of people who don't know that they're reflectors can fall into a lot of traps with it, or have a lot of issues where they kind of lose themselves in their people they're around in their communities and stuff like that. Yeah, so how's it going for you?
It's been such an evolution, and I'm still learning every day
Yeah.
about energetic boundaries. And the biggest challenge is not identifying with how I feel. Because as soon as I feel an emotion, I'm like, oh my gosh, where is this coming from? What is this? And I take a lot on my own. I take a
Yeah.
lot as my own.
Right.
So it's been really nice to get to take human design and use it for my advantage
Yeah.
and like understand what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So here are a few things. These are just words that I was reading that are really helpful for reflectors.
Hmm.
Discernment,
Okay.
detachment,
Okay.
curation, sample, reflect, release.
Mm, I
So
appreciate that.
yeah, I wrote them and I thought this sounds like a really helpful just set of words to like almost make into personal mantras, which is just like reflectors are said to be the samplers of the society because they're constantly like feeling what everybody else is feeling. So it's like sample, select, reflect, and release. And so it's a lot about releasing, I think, as far as I've read. Do you feel like you spend like time after you've been with people just releasing sort of
Constantly. It's something that I say often in my head to myself of I let go of all energy that's not mine. I let go of the thoughts that aren't mine and I let go. And it's been an evolution of trying to trust that that's working
and that is all I need to do.
Yeah, I think putting the intention behind releasing other people's energy is all that
Mhm.
you need in order to release it. I don't believe it like gets stuck or that we don't have a choice. Like you'll hold on
Yeah.
to it if you feel like holding on to it, but I feel like
Mhm.
if we make that intention to release it, we can do that.
Exactly.
And then it's about the other things for reflectors was about discernment and curation. And I think like we talked about that a bit. It's just like being more selective about who you have around.
Mhm. It's
Yeah.
everything. The biggest theme for me right now is detachment of what I've experienced and not identifying with it. And also, as I was talking to you and realizing that you also have open energy centers, like most of us have some open energy center, which is reflecting other people.
Yes.
So I think that's so valuable and important to remember that majority of people are reflectors in some aspect.
Yes, I think so too. And actually, that's a really good insight because I think if you were to ask yourself, like, what things about you do you feel guilty about, or do you feel anxious about, or do you feel not right about? I wonder if you'd find that those were open energy centers for you and you're just constantly like reflecting other people. Or vice versa. Maybe that's where you feel stable, but other people are always projecting onto you. This is just like a really good place to start an inquiry because like I haven't really gone too deep into my own human design chart, but like I do have a lot of open centers, and the more I'm reading about that, the more my life is making sense.
Yeah.
When you as a reflector um really see like the potential in people and see the energy in other people, and they might not even be seeing that stuff in themselves. And so when you realize like, okay, I'm seeing a lot that other people aren't seeing, and then you can start using your discernment to be like, when will I reflect this to them? Will I? When will I? How will I? Because like
Ooh,
not
that's
everybody,
really interesting.
yeah, not everybody wants to see their reflection or is ready.
Wow, I didn't even think that I had a choice of when to reflect to someone else. Wow.
Right?
You have just sparked some type of like realization or different thought form in me that I'm like, wait, right? Because I don't always have to communicate how I'm feeling or how I'm feeling around someone else, but I do have that choice.
Right. I mean, I'm just realizing that now too because like as I'm saying it out loud, I'm realizing it because as a projector, we do this thing of like seeing things from a bird's eye view, and I'm always like, "Oh, like we could just do it this other way." And sometimes it doesn't go well because people feel undermined or like mostly in a work situation, like I chime in with a better idea or like a better way of seeing something when like it steps on other people's toes. And so like something I've been learning is like there's a time and place. Like you have to really use your discernment to make a decision on whether or not you're going to say what you see or you whether or not you say how you feel.
Wow. Yes. I think we're both, and that's what I was talking about in the beginning is how I started to just express how I was feeling to like literally everyone. And that like there's actually use in discerning when and who to express yourself to, or to like decide like, hey, we should do this project differently. And then there's also like the delivery in that. Like, how do I deliver it to this person?
Yeah. I know, like I was saying, projectors are like supposed to wait for the invitation to speak. And because I think it goes poorly a lot of the time if people don't want to hear it. When you learned that you were a reflector, did you have that moment of like so much making sense now?
Yeah. Yes. And I feel like I've almost tried to reject being a reflector because I feel like so much of it is not taking responsibility for my actions and like for how I feel. And maybe this isn't, maybe I misunderstood what it actually means to be a reflector, but that's kind of just my immediate response to learning.
I guess because they like it, human design basically suggests that a reflector automatically takes on the traits and emotions and everything of the people or person they're with. So then, as you're saying, you're like, that feels really dismissive. Like, so if you're a certain way, you can just be like, oh, that wasn't mine.
Yeah.
But apparently, that is the thing about being a reflector is like it's almost never yours. Like, so it says. I'm not a human design expert, but like this is
Mhm.
why I wanted to ask you because I feel like it's really unfair in a way that like all of this stuff is documented about reflectors and like I don't think there's been a lot of investigation on whether or not that feels true for them.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'm really interested to hear your perspective on that. Like do you feel like in your life you really took on the character of the people that you were around the most,
I
you know?
definitely feel like I've taken on the character of a lot of people I'm around.
Yeah.
And something specifically like when I am around people who cultivate their heart and feel so much gratitude, like I feel that. I feel that
Mm.
immensely. And it's something that when I do get to feel that so strongly, I'm really grateful. And it's why I love cacao and it's why I love
Mm.
cacao ceremonies when people are really focusing on their heart center.
Mm.
And then there's like also the other side of it, which I feel like I've experienced a lot more of, is like the toxic side of it,
Yeah.
of people not knowing how to express themselves or getting really angry and really upset. So I grew up, and the way that I responded to my environment is I got really silent and really quiet and really shy. And I've been so observant, just constantly watching my environment, watching the people around me. And so what my life is about now is like shedding the fears and shedding the beliefs and being a lot more particular with who I hang out with and
Yeah.
where I go, how I spend my time and my energy.
Yeah.
And I love my solitude. I love my alone time. And that really resonates. So they talk a lot about how we need a 1 month cycle to make decisions, which is actually very true. So like throughout, I guess this month period, like it's a lot of this back and forth. And so I've been super, at least I feel super indecisive.
Right, right. I was reading that reflectors, I guess everyone else is considered a solar being, like we're more tied to the sun, but that reflectors are lunar beings. And I even read like supposedly it's beneficial for you to even to know what the moon is doing like every day and like
Mm.
what signs it's transiting through and what like is it waxing or waning, like apparently it's a 28-day lunar cycle for reflectors. And because in human design the reflector doesn't have any like defined centers, the moon supposedly is essentially what they're saying is your defined center. So if you need guidance, like a lot of us go to, like I think mine is like solar plexus and I'm supposed to be guided by my emotions, but like reflectors don't have the internal body like navigation system, but the moon supposedly is the thing that is helpful to anchor to. And I was wondering, do you feel that? It says that reflectors feel the moon cycles and even the planetary alignments like really strongly.
I haven't tracked it enough to see a correlation. I
Interesting.
know though that these past 2 or 3 weeks have been very reflective for me, like
Mm,
going inward, seeing patterns and like patterns that I want to change. And it
yeah,
hasn't been this like, oh my God, like I love my life, like so heightened and amazing. It's been like more of this like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize this was a pattern. And oh my gosh, I don't want to keep living like this. And like, oh my gosh, how do I want to continue my
yeah,
life and this podcast and what do I want to
yeah.
turn it into?
I think that like in August there was 7 planets in retrograde. There's still most and Chiron, I think. Like there's still a lot in retrograde and the moon was like closer to Earth. It was like 26,000 kilometers closer to Earth or something. It was like a super full moon, so it's like
Mhm.
it was kind of an intense time for like a lot of people. What I read about reflectors was like their tendency to switch gears a lot, like
Mhm.
almost like not have no consistent like hobby or like thing they want to pursue, or like they can like change religions overnight, like so the ability to change quickly and almost like not have an attachment to what they've been doing, and like the ability to just go to something new tomorrow. Is that something that you feel like you've had in your life?
Yes. And it's I'll say a couple things. It feels challenging because in our society it's like pick one thing, get really good at it, stick with it. You're never going to be good at anything if you're just jumping around. So I've kind of like beaten myself up about that. But what I've seen is I think I go through these like about 2 year periods and maybe give and take, right? Like maybe 1 year. But it started with yoga. I got obsessed with yoga and I went to Thailand, got my yoga teacher training, just like wanted to know everything and anything about it. And then I think I hit a point where I kind of got burnt out on it. And so it went from yoga to like spirituality, obsessed with it, like wanting to learn everything, meeting a ton of people. And that like has been with me. So like yoga and spirituality are kind of like now like at the root of me, and like it doesn't show up all the time 100%, but it's still there and I still love it. And then it went to shuffling and house music and festivals. And that was like 2 to 3 years. And then just when these things don't feel good, they just don't feel good and I'm like, "All right, what's next?" So then it went from shuffling to this chat my channel used to be called Perspective Switch. Now it's Empath Spiritual Awakening. And it was like YouTube videos and then podcasting. And now I am getting to a point where I'm like, okay, something doesn't feel good. I don't want to completely stop, but like I need to pivot. And that is definitely what my life feels like. And then even you have open centers too, right? So you
Oh, I have,
are.
yeah, the thing, what I was reading was projectors have a lot of open centers.
Mhm.
And I think that's what makes them really similar in a way to the reflectors. Here's what I read about projectors. Most types of projectors have the majority of their centers undefined. This means that projectors take in and reflect back other people's energies from these undefined centers. Not only do they reflect the energy back, they also amplify it. And it says that projectors are doing this almost constantly and can get very burnt out and need long breaks or periods of time alone. And it says most projectors who live in an environment of busy energy types will end up overwhelmed and exhausted. And so I'm just like, oh, this is like putting my life into a perspective that really makes a lot of sense for me. And I think maybe as a reflector, does that resonate with you as well? Like getting exhausted by
Yes,
people?
yeah, absolutely.
Like you want to talk to them and then like are very exhausted after, even if you enjoyed
Mhm.
it. Does that happen to you
Yes.
too?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, when I
Like,
go out,
yeah,
events, networking
yeah,
events.
yeah. Like even if there's a room full of people that I genuinely love and enjoy, I still am exhausted at the end of my time with them.
Mhm. Last night I had this event, Spiritual Entrepreneurs, and we got together like amazing people. And we all at the end, even individually, envisioned each other in their manifestation. And like it felt so good and so amazing. And I was like, I have been wanting to do this forever. But like even at the end of that, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I need to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I love you, but like I still am tired.
Yeah. I know, and I felt like that's another thing I felt guilty about until like getting this perspective was like, because I know so many people who just get so charged up by the socializations, like they just want to be
Mm,
doing something
I
all the
don't get
time.
it.
They're always calling people. They're always making, they have like 3 plans a day. And I'm like
Yes.
hearing about their schedule is exhausting. And
So
then I
like,
feel
how do
like, oh
you
my God,
jump from person to person?
I don't know. I was watching this interview with this other reflector, and she said that she legitimately thought she was autistic and like she was getting into her adult life and she was like, there's so much wrong with me. Like she thought she had Asperger's and then all of this. And then when she found out she was a reflector, she realized she'd been completely mistaken, like mistaking her, the way that she was, with all of this being like autism, because she said she was just so overwhelmed by being around people and in social situations, and it was like information overload all the time, and her nervous system was always just like affected, and like she was wondering if she should medicate herself because of just how like intensely sensitive she was. And then when she
Wow.
realized, when she started living her life more like a reflector and like taking, firstly curating the people that she was around, like being more selective about where she went, and then having practices of like guarding her own energy and like realizing what wasn't hers. And like when she started putting all of these things into place, like it now has given her like a totally new way of looking at life, and she feels like obviously right in how she is and who she is. But I thought like how overwhelming it seems like it can be to be a reflector. Like, have you felt super overwhelmed at times?
I think that what usually happens to me is I feel really drained. I'm really tired and
Mm.
really exhausted and really shy and really like to myself.
Mm.
And I think my biggest struggle is judging myself for that, of like,
Mm.
oh, I'm like so weird. I'm so awkward. Why can't I communicate with people? Um, so I don't know. I can't recall a time where I'm like super overwhelmed.
Well, that's good.
I definitely worked on it. And
Ah.
I'm still working on it, of not taking on other people's stuff, and even in like just like interactions or just going out and about and being like to myself and not feeling like obligated. Because another thing, I don't know if this is a reflector trait, but like I want the best for people and I want to help, and like sometimes that could be at the sacrifice of my own well-being. So like I've really been working on stepping out of that like giving aspect and just focusing more on myself and being like the healthiest me I can be, and not
Mhm.
taking on other people's energies.
Yeah, I wonder what your like incarnation cross is, or your like some of the other details, because I think that some of the other human design elements talk more about like your purpose, or like what you always feel drawn towards. Like, so if you always feel that way, it might not be a reflector thing specifically, but something else in your chart that.
That's interesting. I've never heard of incarnation cross. I want to look that up. I'm making a note right now.
Yeah, yeah, do it. I mean, like, I've just scratched the surface on my own chart, but that was one thing when I read mine. It made a lot of sense as well. Like, it wasn't necessarily projector related, but it was like,
Mhm.
oh, it just filled in like a lot of other character traits that I was resonating with. This says that like reflectors often are drawn to spirituality and also have a gift of reading other people. Do you feel like when you're in a room, like you can just look at people and be like, oh, they're having a good day, or those people are agitated, or like.
For sure. Yeah. So this has been something that I've contemplated a lot, of like, am I reading them or am I projecting something about me onto them?
Well, according to human design, you would be
Yeah.
reading them.
Yeah, I definitely would consider myself a really good reader, but like I also feel like you're probably a really good reader as well.
I think so, but I think it's that I think where we have open centers, we
Mm,
can sense and reflect other people. So probably every energy
okay.
type can do this to some extent or specifically in certain places, but like I have a lot of open centers, and so I feel the same way. Like if I'm reading someone, I'm like still open-minded to being like that might not be true. That might be just something I'm I don't want to say I'm imagining it. Like I want to trust my intuition. When I get a feeling about somebody, I just want to trust it. And I think sometimes people don't realize, like if I think someone's agitated, sometimes they don't realize they're agitated. Like they haven't made the conscious connection to like how they're
Definitely.
feeling in that moment. Like they might be like, I'm fine. And you're like, okay, you look like you're about to burst somehow.
Yeah.
But they don't even know
Yes.
it sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as you were just talking, I remembered. So, like, when I go to a party or I go to an event, I like have to look at everyone. Like, I need to see, and I'm reading people, and it's just been a natural instinct. And so, like, I actually just remember when I'm in public, sometimes it can become overwhelming because for some reason I have this tendency to want to look at as many people as possible. It's like this curiosity. So then it's like when I look at people, I'm like tapping into their energy field. So yeah, it can definitely become overwhelming.
Oh wow. I like feel the opposite, and it might be like a defense mechanism, but I specifically don't look at people. Like if I'm going for a walk with somebody, I'm looking at the trees, the sky, the water, the birds. Like I'm looking like up. I can walk by someone I know and not even see them because I'm like looking I guess I'm probably looking at things that don't drain my energy, which is nature. So like if I have a choice, I specifically don't look at people. But like cuz it's like
Yes.
what you were saying is like when you do that, it takes a certain amount of energy, right?
Yeah. And then it's like tapping into their energy.
Yeah.
I am
So I
so
just
curious though. I just like I couldn't imagine walking past someone and not looking at them.
I do it all the
So like
time, and I just realized like how habitual and how serious it is like 2 days ago. I was just like, "Oh my god." I totally walked by someone I knew. Didn't even know it. Okay, so these are some notes that I'm reading, but it says other people will always see aspects of themselves when they meet a reflector. So like supposedly if I'm talking to you, you're somehow reflecting how I am back at me, I
wait,
guess.
I something else I've been thinking about is how long do I need to spend, how much time do I need to spend with a person to start to actually reflect them? Because I think that like I could be in conversation with you right now, but I'm actually still reflecting like the people that I was with last night.
Oh.
I've thought about this.
Oh, the question the interview I was watching yesterday with a different reflector said that sometimes like days later she
Mm,
will be reflecting a behavior that her partner exhibited like days earlier. So she said sometimes there's like this like days are going by and reflections are still coming out.
that's so interesting. Because
Yeah.
and it's maybe it's because when I start to identify with it, it's
Ooh.
harder to let it go.
Yeah.
Especially in I would say toxic situations when I'm reflecting something like really traumatic and toxic to someone, that can linger for like months.
Wow.
And it's because I identify with it. I'm like, well, she just called me ingenuine and like, was it my fault? And like, I don't know why my throat was so closed up. And like, I can't believe I reacted like that. Right. And it just like sticks with me. And I identify it and I judge myself as wrong and bad. And like,
Yeah.
um, that's been the hardest. There was like a situation maybe 7 months ago that was just so toxic. And I hadn't felt that way since I was like 18 years old, like over 10 years ago, 13 years ago with my dad. Like that's like the way I felt in my like chaotic traumatic household, and I just experienced that like 7 months ago, and it was so hard to be in that situation, and I haven't talked to that person since. And like to stop identifying with how I emotionally reacted has been such a challenge for me.
Wow.
Because like I also like I'm so compassionate and I care about people and I don't want to be like well like that was you. Like I think I take responsibility for things that I don't need to take responsibility for.
Yeah. And also those things, like there's some deep programming inside of us,
Hmm.
of our past traumas, that it's not so easy to overwrite those programs a lot of the time. So sometimes taking a year to like process something away and like detach from it is kind of just normal. Like depending on how deep that part of your psyche is, like that conditioning, right? Reflectors are meant to hold space at the center of the community, it says. That's what I think you're doing, like with your podcast. You're holding space at the center of this community. Like, that's literally what you're doing.
I'm like trying to think about what that really means.
Holding space is like allowing people who have something to say to express it,
Mm,
and just allowing them to express. And then, like, where your curiosity is piqued, like inserting the right question at the right time, and just hearing. It just feels like you're in the right place, like for your gifts and like what you want to do and what excites you. Do you feel that
thank
way?
you. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it was so hard for me to start. Like this was like what I've always wanted to do for so long since I started my spiritual journey. And I really do feel like aligned. I'm like finally doing what I've really wanted to do.
Oh,
And
good.
like it's so beautiful to when we do the thing, like when we do the heart thing that we want and how all of the people come into our lives that like we truly want to be around. That's the
Yeah.
most beautiful part, the connection.
Yeah. Oh, you're a human design reflector with a Cancer moon. Like, that's an intense, like, emotional human experience.
Hmm. Yeah, and it
And
was really interesting growing up too of reflecting my household of my mom died when I was 12 and then I was with two brothers and my dad who literally never cried. Like I think I've seen my dad cry once and I was the one who cried like all the time. Just so much like uncontrollable tears. And they're just like what's going on? And I'm like I don't know
I
what's wrong with me, but now I was reflecting the environment.
see, that's what I mean about like sometimes like finding out I was a projector was actually so illuminating for me when I looked back on my life. And like I think that probably like is the same for you because it puts things into context. You're like, man, I was like taking on a lot of the energy, or like if you're really emotional and you have a Cancer moon, like that supposedly makes sense. I'm not an astrologer, but this is what I've heard. So sometimes like I don't like necessarily subscribe to these systems as like a way, like as this like religious thing where like I buy into it 100%, but I feel like it helps us understand ourselves and like come to terms with some of the things that some of the patterns we've had in our life and be like, okay, it's okay. Like
Mhm.
everybody's a
Yeah.
certain way for certain reasons.
Yes, and uh it's so easy to get caught up in just our environment
Yeah.
and to hold on to things that I'm learning to let go of. And something that they talk about is we get I get disappointed when I identify with something. And so when I feel like I get caught up in someone else's toxic energy,
Yeah.
I completely identify with that. I'm like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god, this person doesn't like me. I blew up. I got angry. Maybe I wasn't being authentic or maybe I wasn't speaking up or just like all of this stuff and I can get so caught up in that this is now me. Like how could I act
Yeah.
that way? And so it's
Yeah.
hard for me to like shed that.
Yeah. Oh, it's been so cool. It's been so cool to get your perspective and get all my questions answered. Thank you. Thank you for being available and joining me.
Of course. And I love seeing you on your journey too.
Yeah.
When Alessandra told me about you, I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, wait, what? Let me follow her. And she was saying how you were so passionate about this.
I am.
And
I super am. Like, I'll do this forever. Like,
oh,
it's funny because I was saying how like I do hop from thing to thing and I don't really like stick around in different hobbies or different jobs very long, but like this thing, I'll be like an old lady doing this. Thank you so much for being
awesome.
my guest today. And hey, let's do another episode in the future on something. If you ever have an idea and you're like, I wonder what Amy would say about that, hit me up.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.